I'm Marian Ellis, 71 years old, and for the third month in a row, I've been hiding cookies behind the extra linens in my bedroom closet, the gluten-free kind that cost 4 times more than regular. But my daughter-in-law, Tricia, eats them anyway. Says they're too cheap and unhealthy. I used to leave them in the kitchen cabinet like normal people do, back when it still felt like my kitchen, last week. I opened my body lotion and it was nearly gone. The same thing happened to my toothpaste shampoo, even my hand cream. And when I asked Tricia about it, she just shrugged and said, "Oh, sorry. I thought it was generic before I go any further." Let me know where you're listening from in the comments. And tap that subscribe button if you've ever had to stand your ground in your own home. My husband Warren passed 6 years ago, lung cancer. They said, though he'd never smoked a day in his life after that. The house got too quiet, too big, so when my son Charlie called and said he and Tricia had a falling out with their landlord, I didn't hesitate. I told them they could come stay with me until they found a new place. A couple of months at most. Charlie said they moved into the guest room upstairs, the one with the smaller bed. But within 2 weeks, Tricia started complaining, said the room was too cramped and that their schedules made it hard to sleep properly with me walking around across the hall. So I gave them my room, the master bedroom. I moved into the guest room without a word. A month later, Tricia knocked on my door and asked if I could move my sewing machines to the garage. Said the sound of stitching kept her awake during the day. She worked late nights dispatching cabs, and Charlie had just started long-haul trucking. Warren had installed special lights in that room for me years ago. Perfect brightness for fine detail. Sewing there were shelves lining the walls neatly organized with threads and folded fabric. A wide table in the center for cutting patterns. But I nodded and cleared a space in the garage, pushed aside old lawn tools and holiday bins, set up my machines next to the water heater. I thought they'd help with the bills, at least groceries cable something. But every time I brought it up, Charlie would say, "Mom, we're just trying to get back on our feet. Give us a little more time." Months turned into years. They stayed in the house, rent-free. Tricia reorganized my pantry without asking, and once replaced all the family photos in the hallway with abstract art. "Your pictures are kind of gloomy, Marian," she said. She meant pictures of Warren and me on our wedding day, our son's 3rd birthday, our dog, Scout, the day we brought him home from the shelter. I stopped cooking cabbage stew because Tricia said it made the whole house stink. I started doing laundry in the morning instead of evenings because she said the washing machine disrupted her meditation. And still, I told myself they were just going through a rough patch, that things would get better, that Charlie was still the boy I raised. Then one night, Charlie came home from a trip and they invited me to dinner. They'd ordered pizza, said it was my favorite anchovies and olives. It was the first time they'd ever asked me to sit with them at the table. I should have known something was off. I sat down and they poured wine. Tricia even smiled at me, that odd, tight-lipped kind of smile. Charlie asked how my sewing was going, said he was proud of me, then leaned forward and said they'd been talking about the future, about starting a family and needing more space. That was when he said it, that they wanted to remodel the house, combine my bedroom and the guest room to make a nursery, and that I could move into the garage. "You've already got your workshop there," Tricia said sweetly. I stared at them across the table, my son and the woman he married. The same garage where the air smells like old paint and mold. Where I wear gloves in the winter, just to thread a needle. They talked like they were doing me a favor. I didn't say anything right away. But later that night, I lay awake in bed, the ceiling glowing pale from the streetlights outside, and I knew something had to change. Not them, me. That night after dinner, I lay in bed without sleeping. I'd pulled the curtains closed tight, but the moonlight still crept in around the edges, washing the walls in that cold, bluish silver that makes everything look unfamiliar. The wind moved through the trees outside, and every now and then a car passed, casting stripes of light across the ceiling. I watched them come and go, one after another. I wasn't angry, not exactly. Just still. still like a lake when the water's gone cold. It had been 5 years. 5 years of moving aside, making room, quieting down, giving more than I got. And now the people I'd let into my home were planning to turn it into something that didn't include me, unless you count the garage. By morning, I had made up my mind. I got up before the sun and went straight to the kitchen. The house was still quiet. I put on a pot of coffee, then opened the desk drawer and pulled out the folder where I kept all the important papers: mortgage agreement, property tax receipts, insurance statements. I laid them out on the table and started to go through each page one by one. I needed to know exactly what I had left to pay and if there was any way to speed up the process. Or, better yet, get out of it entirely. It took an hour before I saw what I needed. I'd already paid off most of it. The value of the house, even with the market the way it was, would more than cover what was left. I sat back in my chair and looked out the window. The sky was pale gray now, not quite morning, but close. It felt like something had loosened in my chest. I opened my laptop. Fort Lauderdale had always sounded nice, sunny, warm, close to the water. Warren used to talk about retiring there. We'd sit on the back porch and imagine a small house with a view of the ocean. Nothing fancy, just a place to wake up to the sound of waves. That dream had gone quiet when he passed, but now it came back like a tide rolling in. I looked up listings. There were plenty of one-bedroom condos within reach. Clean, bright places with balconies and sea views. I bookmarked a few, then searched for real estate agents near me. At 9 sharp, I called the number for an agency I'd found online. A woman named Olivia Reed answered, clear voice, polite, quick to understand. I told her I needed to sell my house quietly and quickly. She asked a few questions, then said she had an opening at 11 if I could meet her nearby. I said yes. We picked a small cafe 2 blocks away, a place Charlie and Tricia wouldn't think to go. I left a note on the kitchen table, went to Mrs. Perry's to drop off some pants. Back before dinner. Lasagna's in the fridge. Then I put on my navy dress with the small floral print, pinned my hair up, added a touch of lipstick. I hadn't dressed like that in a while. I looked in the mirror and didn't quite recognize myself, but not in a bad way. Olivia was already at the cafe when I arrived. She stood up to greet me with a firm handshake and kind eyes. She asked about the house, how long I'd lived there, what shape it was in. I gave her the details. She nodded, took notes, asked smart questions. When she heard how much I still owed on the mortgage, she smiled. "You're in a good position," she said. "If the house is in the condition you say it is, we can probably sell quickly. I already have a young family looking in your neighborhood." I told her I didn't want Charlie and Tricia to know. Not yet. She understood. "We can schedule the showing when they're both out. If everything moves smoothly, we could close in 2 weeks." That night after I got home, I began packing in small, careful steps. I started with the things I knew I'd take: Warren's letters from his business trips, my old sewing scissors with the worn brass handles, the framed picture of our wedding day. The rest, extra dishes books I'd never read again. Winter coats I hadn't worn in years, I put into boxes and tucked beneath the bed or in the backs of closets. By day, I acted the same. Made dinner, folded laundry, hemmed pants in the garage. Neither of them noticed anything different. Tricia came and went without a word. Charlie slept late after his truck routes and spent most of his time on the couch or in his room. On Tuesday, Olivia came by to see the house. She walked through each room, taking pictures and jotting down notes. When she finished, she said she'd contact the Hendersons, the family she'd mentioned at the cafe. "They're very interested," she told me. "If they like it, they'll make an offer right away." I asked when. "Friday afternoon," she said, "if that works for you." Charlie was scheduled to be on another trip. Tricia wouldn't be home until after 6. "Friday is perfect," I said. That afternoon, I walked to the park by the pond. Warren and I used to come there on Saturdays. I sat on the same bench and opened my phone. I confirmed a flight to Fort Lauderdale 2 weeks from now. I scheduled viewings for 3 condos and marked each one on a map. The air smelled like fresh-cut grass. The ducks were out in the water, gliding slowly between lily pads. I stayed until the sky began to turn pink and gold. Back at the house, I kept packing, quietly, deliberately, one box at a time. By Thursday, everything I needed was in a suitcase by my bed. Friday came clear and sunny. The Hendersons arrived at 1 just as planned. A couple in their mid-30s with twins, a boy and a girl about 6 years old. They walked through the house slowly, their hands brushing against the door frames, their eyes lighting up when they saw the backyard. "You could hang a swing here," the father said, pointing to the old apple tree. "That's always been the dream." His wife nodded. "This feels like home already." We sat at the kitchen table and talked over the details. The offer came in just above what Olivia and I had discussed. I accepted on the spot. They asked about closing. "Monday works," Olivia said. "Paperwork's already in motion." They nodded. "We can move in Tuesday." I said I'd be out by then. My flight left at 9 that morning. When they left, I walked through the house alone. Room by room. The photos were already packed. The linens were washed and folded. The sewing machine was boxed up and labeled in sharp black marker. Saturday came and went. I made lunch, did laundry, kept to myself. Charlie came home late from his trip. He walked past my room without stopping. Didn't say a word. By Sunday morning, everything felt oddly still. I'd been preparing for weeks, but now that the house was sold and the goodbye was coming, it didn't feel heavy. Just quiet. Charlie and Tricia hadn't said a thing. Not yet. But dinner that night would change that, and nothing after would be the same. Dinner that Sunday started quiet. I'd made a pot of chicken and vegetable stew and baked an apple pie that morning, something I hadn't done in a long time. Charlie came into the kitchen just as I was setting the table. He leaned against the counter and smiled almost shyly. "Smells good in here," he said. "Apple pie?" I nodded. "Haven't made one in a while." He reached for a spoon to stir the stew, then hesitated. "Tricia's on her way back from her mother's. Should be here any minute." She walked through the door not long after with a fresh manicure and a small bag from a salon. Her tone was chipper, too chipper. "Smells like home," she said, slipping off her shoes and heading for the silverware drawer. "Need any help setting the table?" We sat down not long after. Charlie talked about his last route, a long haul down to Phoenix and back. Tricia chimed in with something about her office dispatch trouble, a new manager. I listened and nodded. I waited. The pie had just been served when Charlie cleared his throat. "Mom," he said, his fork still resting on the plate. "We've been thinking a lot about what happened the other night, about the conversation we had." Tricia picked it up from there. "We're sorry if we made you feel pushed. That was never our goal." I watched them both. Charlie leaned forward. "We want you to feel like this is still your home. That hasn't changed." Tricia glanced at him, then back at me. "That's why we've been talking about a solution. Something that could work for everyone." Charlie nodded. "We'd like to buy the house from you." I set down my fork. "You want to buy the house?" "Yes," he said quickly. "Take over the mortgage, free you up from the upkeep, and let you downsize to something more manageable. We could remodel here, have the space for the baby." I waited. Tricia folded her napkin. "It just makes sense. You'd have less to worry about, and we'd finally be able to plan for our future." I asked them how much they were offering. Charlie quoted a number that was well below what Olivia and I had agreed on. Not even enough to cover what I'd already accepted from the Hendersons. I smiled politely. "You've already started the mortgage process." Tricia gave a small nod. "We've been speaking with a credit counselor. He thinks we could close in 6 weeks, maybe a little sooner." I looked between them. They were so certain. So sure I'd say yes. After all, I always had. I appreciate the offer, I said softly, but the house is already sold. They stared at me, blinking. What do you mean, sold? Charlie asked. I mean the sale closes tomorrow. A family came to see the house on Friday. They made an offer. I accepted. Trisha's voice rose. You can't sell this house without telling us. We live here. You're guests, I said, and I'm telling you now. Charlie looked like he was trying to make sense of a language he didn't speak. You're not serious. I am. Trisha pushed her chair back. And what, you're just moving where to Florida? I said. Fort Lauderdale. I've rented an apartment there. My flight's Tuesday morning. Her mouth opened and closed. Charlie ran a hand through his hair. You're 71, Mom. You don't know anyone there. You're going to live alone. I nodded. The same way I've been living here. Charlie dropped his eyes. Trisha didn't. This is crazy, she said. You can't just dump us like this. We have nowhere to go. You have 3 days, I said, rising from the table. The new owners get the keys at 8 on Tuesday. If you're still here, you'll need to explain yourselves to them. They didn't follow me upstairs. I closed my bedroom door and sat on the bed. My hands trembled a little, but my chest felt quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after you've said what needed saying. The next morning, I woke to silence. No sound of dishes clinking or the shower running. I walked downstairs and found the kitchen empty. Dishes from the night before were still on the table. Charlie's car was gone. I poured a cup of coffee and sat by the window. For a moment, I thought maybe they'd already left. Maybe they'd gone to Trisha's mother's. But then the front door opened, and there they were. Morning, Mom, Charlie said, setting his keys on the counter. Sleep okay? I nodded. Trisha helped herself to coffee. We had a talk with your sister yesterday. My heart slowed. Doris Charlie sat down across from me. We told her everything. About how you've been acting. About this sudden decision to sell the house and move away from everyone. I looked at them both but said nothing. She's worried, Trisha said. She thinks you've been not quite yourself. Charlie nodded. So we invited her to come by. She's on her way now. I stood. Then I'd better make some tea. They watched me confused. I didn't stop moving. She's not coming for tea, Charlie said finally. She's coming to talk about your condition. I turned and looked him in the eye. You mean the condition where I decide to take back my life? See, Trisha said, turning to him. She's defensive. It's one of the signs. I didn't answer. I just went on boiling water and setting out cups. A few minutes later, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Doris, along with her son Edwin, his wife Priscilla, and their little boy Timothy. They stepped inside like they'd been invited to an intervention. Doris gave me a hug. It was polite, not warm. We need to talk, she said. I figured, I said, motioning toward the kitchen. We all sat around the table. Doris folded her hands. Marion, I'm concerned. Selling the house. Moving across the country. That's not like you. I stirred my tea. Maybe it's time I stopped being so predictable. Doris glanced at Charlie. He says you've been isolated, withdrawn, not remembering things. Is that what he told you? She hesitated. Well, it's not like you to do something so sudden. It's not sudden, I said. It's been building for years. You just didn't see it. The room went still. Edwin finally spoke. Aunt Marion, are you sure this is what you want? I looked at him, then at the boy sitting beside him, quietly playing with his phone. He'd been in my house maybe once all year. Yes, I said. I'm sure. No one moved for a long time. Finally, Doris stood. We just want what's best for you. I know, I said. So do I. The tension in the room didn't lift, but the fight seemed to fade. One by one, they rose to leave. Doris paused before stepping out the door. "I don't agree with this," she said, "but I won't stand in your way." I watched them walk down the driveway. Charlie stayed behind. Tricia had disappeared up the stairs. I poured myself another cup of tea and sat down at the table. The house was still again, but I could feel something coming, something I'd need to be ready for. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. The house was quiet, the kind of stillness that settles in right before something changes for good. I padded downstairs, turned on the lamp over the kitchen sink, and poured a glass of water. The floor creaked under my steps the same way it always had since Warren and I bought the place nearly 4 decades ago. I checked the calendar on the wall Monday. Closing day. At 8 o'clock sharp, the notary was scheduled to arrive with the documents. Olivia would come shortly after. The buyers were sending someone from their office to finalize everything. I had everything in place. The paperwork, the keys, my packed suitcase by the door, but Charlie and Tricia were still upstairs. At 7, I knocked gently on their bedroom door. No answer. I knocked again, louder. "Charlie. You two up?" After a moment, I heard rustling behind the door. Charlie opened it just a crack, rubbing his eyes. "What time is it, 7? The closing is at 8. I need the living room cleared." Tricia called from the bed. "You're really going through with this?" I nodded. "Yes." They didn't say much more. I walked away. By the time Olivia arrived dressed in a neat gray suit with a leather folder tucked under her arm, Charlie was in the kitchen, arms crossed, silent. Tricia sat at the table with her phone in her hand, not looking up. The notary came right behind Olivia. She laid out the documents, explained each page, and guided me where to sign. When I handed over the keys, Olivia gave me a small smile. "Congratulations, Marion. It's done." I walked her to the door. "Thank you for everything." She nodded. "If you need anything else, even in Florida, give me a call. I know people down there." The door closed behind her. Charlie stood in the middle of the living room, staring at the blank wall where the family portrait had hung. "So that's it," he said. "You're just leaving. I picked up my suitcase. I told you I was." Tricia followed me to the front steps. "Where are we supposed to go?" I turned. "You'll have to figure that out." They didn't follow me beyond the porch. At the airport, I checked my bag and sat by the gate with a cup of coffee. The flight to Fort Lauderdale boarded on time. I watched the rows of people filing into their seats, some chatting, some quiet. I found my spot by the window and rested my hands in my lap. When the wheels left the ground, I looked out at the shrinking rooftops below. My street, my town. The house I'd held on to longer than I should have. It was all behind me now. I landed just before noon. The heat wrapped around me as I stepped outside. Florida heat doesn't ask permission. It just wraps you up and holds you there. I picked up my rental car and drove to the apartment, a second-floor unit in a quiet building with a small balcony that overlooked the water. The complex manager handed me the keys and walked me up, pointing out the mailbox and laundry room along the way. The apartment was small, just 1 bedroom, 1 bath, a little kitchen with a narrow window. But the floors were clean, the walls freshly painted, and the couch looked comfortable. I set my suitcase by the bed and opened the balcony door. From there, I could see the edge of the bay. I sat down and just listened. Boats in the distance, the low hum of traffic, seagulls crying overhead. That evening, I walked 2 blocks to a small grocery store and picked up the basics: milk, bread, fruit, eggs. The cashier smiled at me. Her name tag said, Gloria. "New in town?" she asked. I nodded. "Just arrived." "Well, welcome. It's a good place to be." I thanked her, carried my bag home, and made scrambled eggs for dinner. Later that night, I sat at the kitchen table and flipped through a small notebook. I made a list of everything I needed to do, change my mailing address schedule, a checkup with a new doctor, find a good library nearby. I turned to a fresh page and wrote, "Things I want to learn." Below that, I added, "Swim better, paint maybe, take a real vacation for no reason." The next morning, I walked to a little cafe I'd seen near the water. It had wicker chairs and yellow umbrellas. I ordered a coffee and sat down with the local paper. As I was reading about a neighborhood art walk happening that weekend, I heard someone ask, "Mind if I sit?" I looked up. A woman about my age, with short gray curls and sun-darkened skin, gestured toward the chair across from me. "Go right ahead," I said. She smiled. "I'm Helen. I live 2 buildings down from here." "You new?" "Just got in yesterday," I said. "I'm Marion." She extended her hand. "Nice to meet you, Marion. You're gonna like it here." We talked about the art walk, the humidity, and which local bakery made the best rolls. She gave me her number and said if I ever needed anything, ride to the pharmacy company for lunch, I could call. I tucked her number into my notebook. That night, I walked to the water again. The sun was low orange, spilling across the sky. I sat on a bench by the dock and let the breeze move through my hair. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for someone to knock or for shoes on the stairs or a voice calling from the other room. It was just me, and somehow that was enough. On Thursday morning, I woke to a knock at the door. A soft, steady rhythm. I slipped on my robe and answered it, half expecting Helen. Instead, a young man stood in the hallway, dressed in a dark polo and khakis, holding a small package. "Delivery for Marion Wembley," he said. I took the envelope. "Thank you." Back inside, I sat at the kitchen table and opened it. Inside was a folded letter and a printed receipt from a law office in Nebraska. The letterhead was familiar Mitchell & Bray, the same firm that handled Warren's affairs years ago. My hands tensed as I unfolded the letter. It was addressed to me by name typed and signed at the bottom by a paralegal I didn't know. It read, "Dear Miss Wembley, per your family's request, we are confirming that all property titles associated with the former address in Nebraska have been formally transferred and finalized. No outstanding claims or challenges have been filed at this time. If you have any concerns or require additional documentation, please contact our office directly. Mitchell & Bray, LLP." Beneath that was a note handwritten in black ink. "You'll regret this. T." I folded the paper slowly and placed it back in the envelope. The T wasn't hard to guess. I made tea and sat by the window for a while. Then I opened my laptop and sent an email to Olivia forwarding the document and asking if she'd received anything unusual on her end. She called within the hour. "I haven't received anything formal, Marion," she said, "but I'll keep an eye out. That kind of message, though, it's more intimidation than action." I thanked her. We talked a bit longer, mostly about how Fort Lauderdale was treating me. Then I hung up and went back to my list. That afternoon, I walked to the community center Helen had mentioned. They had flyers pinned to a corkboard near the entrance, Potluck's Book Swaps, a watercolor group that met on Saturdays. I signed up for the watercolor group and picked up a pamphlet for the senior swim class. The next few days fell into a rhythm. Mornings at the cafe, afternoons walking the shoreline or reading by the balcony. Helen dropped by once with fresh mangoes from a neighbor's yard. We peeled them in my kitchen and talked about her late husband, about the weather, about nothing and everything. Then on Sunday, the phone rang. It was Charlie. "Hi, Mom." I waited. "We've moved out," he said. "Put our stuff in storage for now. Trisha's staying with her mother until we figure things out." I said, "Okay." There was a pause. I didn't mean for it to get like this. "I know." Another pause. You really left, he said quietly. I did. He didn't speak for a long time. Then I hope you're okay. I am, he sighed. I miss you. I didn't say anything. After we hung up, I went for a walk. The air was thick with heat, but I didn't mind. The boardwalk stretched out ahead of me, lined with small shops and sunburned tourists. I passed a bookstore with a hand-painted sign and stepped inside. The woman behind the counter greeted me with a nod. I browsed for a while, then picked up a novel by an author I'd loved in my 20s. That night, I cooked for the first time in days. A little pasta, some steamed vegetables, and a glass of white wine. I sat by the open window and let the sound of waves drift in. The next morning, a letter came in the mail. It was from the city of Lincoln. A final notice about an outstanding balance owed on the last property tax bill, dated 3 weeks after the sale. I called Olivia again. She picked up on the second ring. "They're pushing back," I said. This came from the city. She told me not to worry, that she'd follow up herself and make sure everything was squared. "They're hoping you'll panic," she said. "Don't." 2 days later, I got another call, this time from Doris. "I heard you got some mail," she said. I didn't answer. "I told them not to push it," she continued. "But Charlie's desperate, Marion. They didn't expect you to go through with it." "I did." "I know." She was quiet a moment. "You should know," she added, "they've been trying to claim you weren't of sound mind when you sold the house. Talking to lawyers. Asking around." I pressed the phone tighter to my ear. "I'm not surprised. I told them to drop it," Doris said, "that it would only embarrass them. But I can't make promises, Marion. They feel entitled. You always gave in before." "Not anymore." "No," she said, "not anymore." After we hung up, I stared at the phone for a long time. Then I went into the bedroom, pulled out my file folder, and began collecting everything: sale contracts, proof of account transfers, notarized copies. I scanned each one and emailed digital copies to Olivia, and also to a backup email I created just for this. That night, I sat on the balcony with my notebook and crossed something off the list. Defend yourself with dignity. A soft knock on the door startled me. When I opened it, Helen stood there, holding 2 glasses and a bottle of soda water. "I made lemon spritz," she said. Felt like a night for sitting and sipping. I stepped aside and let her in. We sat out on the balcony, the sky darkening around us, cicadas humming from the trees below. She didn't ask questions, and I didn't offer details. We just listened to the wind. Somewhere deep in that quiet, I felt the ground settle beneath me. The envelope came on a Tuesday morning, tucked neatly between a water bill and a catalog I hadn't asked for. The return address caught my eye: First Bray and Malkin Estate Law, Lincoln, Nebraska. Different firm, different name, but I knew it was them. I brought it inside and laid it on the counter without opening it. Made coffee, fed the birds outside on the balcony railing, sat down and looked out at the bay until the sun climbed high enough to bleach the clouds. When I finally opened it, the letter inside was short. 2 paragraphs, and one very clear sentence in the middle. Our clients, Charles Wembley and Patricia Wembley, intend to contest the validity of the property sale dated June 3rd. Below that, a request for any documentation I had regarding the transaction. I read it twice, then stood up and walked to the bedroom. Pulled out my file box and laid everything on the bed: copies, receipts, notarized records. Everything was in order. I called Olivia and left her a message. She returned it 10 minutes later. "They're bluffing," she said. "They'll try to drag it out, maybe scare you into settling or giving something up. But you're clean, Marion. I've got the signatures. I've got the sale video recorded per state code. I've already forwarded copies to the new buyer's legal team. Should I respond? I asked. Only through me. Don't engage directly. I thanked her, hung up, and sat still for a while. The ceiling fan moved slow and steady overhead. I watched it for a full minute before I got up and got dressed. Later that afternoon, I drove to a little consignment shop I'd seen tucked behind a row of palm trees near the old marina. I found a dress there, sky blue with soft cotton sleeves. It reminded me of something I'd worn on my honeymoon. I tried it on and bought it without a second thought. As I left the store, my phone buzzed. A voicemail. Helen's voice came through the speaker. Hi, Marion, just checking in. There's a local church group doing a shrimp boil Saturday. Live music? You're welcome to come with me, no pressure. Just thought you might enjoy it. I pressed save and slipped the phone back into my bag. The next morning, I met with a notary downtown. Olivia had suggested I make a formal affidavit summarizing everything: my intentions, my records, my mental clarity at the time of the sale. The notary's office was tucked into a 2-story building with faded blue shutters. Inside, the air smelled faintly of citrus and copier ink. I signed, dated, and sealed the document. A copy was sent straight to Olivia. By Friday, another letter had arrived. This time, it came certified. I signed for it at the front desk. Inside was a formal intent to challenge filed by Charlie and Trisha's attorney. A full 6 pages, mostly empty posturing, but one line stuck out. Clients allege Ms. Wembley exhibited diminished capacity and undue influence from unnamed third parties. I read it aloud softly there in my kitchen. Then I took out a pen and wrote a single line in my notebook. They're trying to say I wasn't myself. That afternoon, I called Doris. She picked up on the 3rd ring. Hello, it's Marion. She paused. I heard they filed. You told them not to, I said. I did. I waited. They think you'll fold, she said finally. They think if they drag it through court, you'll settle just to make it stop. They're wrong. I know. We sat in silence for a long moment. I'm sorry they're doing this to you, she said. Her voice was soft. I'm not surprised. I told Charlie he'd regret it. There was a quiet sound on her end, like wind against the phone. If you need someone to testify, she added, about how sound of mind you were, how many times you told them to leave, I'll do it. I'll keep that in mind. After we hung up, I opened my laptop and started drafting a timeline. Not just the sale, but every time Charlie or Trisha had refused to leave the police reports, the conversations I'd had with Olivia, the phone calls I'd logged. Everything I could remember I wrote down. Then I attached supporting documents one by one. By the end of the day, it was a full file. I sent a copy to Olivia, a second to a secure backup drive. On Saturday, I met Helen outside the church hall. She wore a straw hat and carried a cloth tote with 2 water bottles and a foldable fan. We stood in line together under a white tent strung with paper lanterns. The shrimp boil smelled rich and peppery. The music was soft bluegrass, slow and even. We found a spot beneath a sycamore tree. Helen passed me a paper plate. They've got peach cobbler if you've got room later, she said. I smiled and took a bite of the shrimp. The seasoning lingered on my tongue. Later that night, after I'd washed the dishes and turned off the porch light, I sat in the dark with just the moon above the water. The legal papers were stacked in a folder on the counter. I knew there'd be more. More letters, more jabs, more desperate attempts to claw back what I'd taken away: the house, the security, the assumption that I would always be there. But something had changed. This wasn't a fight I feared. It was one I understood. Under the ceiling fans of the county courthouse, I sat in a side room beside Olivia. Her folders were open. Her phone silenced her pen, tapping once, twice, then still. Across the polished oak table sat a junior associate from the firm. Charlie and Tricia had hired a man young enough to be my grandson, with crisp cuffs and too much cologne. He cleared his throat and began. Our clients maintain that your mental state at the time of the sale was compromised by emotional stress and age-related decline. Olivia raised her hand, firm and quiet. We'll be submitting medical records confirming Ms. Wembley's full cognitive clarity reviewed and signed off by 2 licensed professionals within the last year. We also have time-stamped recordings of the sale, notarized forms, and certified payment documentation. He blinked, adjusted his tie, and as for the claim of undue influence, she added, we're prepared to call 4 independent witnesses, including law enforcement officers who responded to previous disturbances at the Wembley residence, who will testify to the plaintiff's behavior and Miss Wembley's repeated requests that they vacate the property. He didn't speak right away, just nodded stiffly and wrote something down. The session ended in less than an hour. On the way out, Olivia touched my arm. They'll try to settle, she said. Wait and see. By the time we reached the car, my phone buzzed. A voicemail. It was from the buyers, the young couple who now owned the house. Hi, Ms. Wembley. Just a heads up, the woman said. Someone left a note on the porch this morning tucked under the flower pot. It said, "This isn't over. My husband thinks we should install cameras. We just wanted to keep you in the loop." I forwarded the message to Olivia. 3 days later, a formal offer arrived. A buyback arrangement. Charles and Tricia would drop the challenge if I agreed to refund the full sale amount plus a small penalty. It was written in stiff legalese, but the desperation showed. I declined through Olivia, who added in writing that any further attempts to contact me directly would be considered harassment. They tried once more. A letter that arrived in an unmarked envelope handwritten by Tricia. She wrote about family, about mistakes, about not wanting to fight like this. I read it at the kitchen table, a soft rain pattering against the windows. She asked if we could meet, just us, somewhere neutral, just to talk. I didn't respond. Instead, I sent a copy to Olivia, who scanned and archived it without comment. A week later, the court date was confirmed. The hearing itself was brief. Olivia brought the timeline, the records, the testimonies. I was called to speak only once. I wore a navy blouse with a pearl pin I'd kept from my wedding set. When I stood, the courtroom went quiet. The judge was an older woman with silver hair and a voice like a worn hymn book, firm, steady, plain-spoken. She asked me to confirm my intent when I sold the house. I said yes, that I had no regrets. She asked whether I had felt pressured. No, I said clearly. No one pressured me. If anything, the pressure was to stay quiet, to keep handing over pieces of my life until there was nothing left. That was all I said. When I sat down, Olivia reached into her folder and passed me a folded page, one of the signed records from the sale in my own handwriting. The judge ruled the challenge dismissed with prejudice. No further appeals permitted. She spoke for 5 minutes. About the importance of respecting elders, about autonomy and documentation and intent. I listened to every word, steady as stone. When it was done, Charlie wouldn't look at me. Tricia stared hard, then turned quickly when I met her eyes. Outside the courthouse, Olivia and I stood beneath the shade of a cedar tree. They won't try again, she said. No, I answered. They won't. We walked to the car. The sun had just cleared the clouds, and the sidewalk steamed softly in the heat. Later that night, I made cornbread and fried catfish and opened a new jar of preserves. I set 2 places at the table. Helen came by with a small peach pie and a warm towel. We ate slow, talked about music, about where to find good tomatoes this time of year, about how the water looked a little bluer now that the dust had settled. After she left, I stood in the living room for a while, looking out at the shoreline. The file of documents sat on the side table, closed now. Quiet. There was nothing left to prove. A few weeks after the ruling, I walked into the bakery on Main, just as the morning sun lit the tops of the pastry cases. I hadn't been in since the week after Darren passed, but the girl behind the counter still remembered my name. She smiled and pointed to a new batch of sourdough cooling in the corner. I picked up 2 loaves, one for me, one for Helen, and tucked them under my arm as I stepped back outside. The breeze was warm, but not too warm. It carried the scent of salt from the inlet and a little bit of rosemary from the planters by the hardware store. Life didn't change all at once. It came back slowly, soft things, small things. A fresh coat of paint on the porch railing. The way my name was printed now on the deed with no asterisks. That call from the buyers letting me know the front garden was blooming again just like it used to when Darren planted marigolds near the mailbox. One afternoon, I found a box I hadn't seen in years. It was tucked in the back of the bedroom closet behind some old coats nearly forgotten. Inside were photos, bundled letters, a quilt my mother had stitched when I first moved into that house. At the bottom was a folded sheet of notebook paper worn soft at the creases. I recognized Charlie's handwriting. He must have been 12. He'd drawn a picture of our house with me waving from the porch. Underneath, he'd written, "Home is wherever you are, Mama." I sat with that for a long time. I don't know when that boy disappeared. Somewhere between baseball practice and his first job, I suppose. Life keeps moving, and some things go quiet before you realize they're gone. But I also know this, I still have that porch. I still have my name, and no one else will ever take that from me again. People in town don't ask much anymore. They nod, hold the door, sometimes mention how peaceful the place looks these days. And it does. Not because it's fancy or grand, but because it's mine. Fully, quietly mine. I still set the table for 2 sometimes out of habit. I still walk to the dock when the weather's good and sit with a thermos and the gulls. Some evenings, Helen brings her knitting, and we talk about nothing in particular. We've both lived long enough to know that some stories don't need retelling. But if there's one thing I've learned through all this, through the silence, the shock, the steady reclaiming of my own life, it's that standing up for yourself doesn't always look like shouting or fighting. Sometimes it's as simple as signing your name, locking your door, calling it home. And if you've ever been made to feel like a guest in your own life, like your worth depends on someone else's approval, just know it doesn't. You're allowed to start over. You're allowed to protect what's yours. And you're allowed to do it with grace. Thank you for listening. If this story touched something in you, maybe reminded you of your own quiet strength, feel free to share it or just leave a comment to say you were here. I'll be here too, just living my life. One peaceful day at a time.